Ever try to really size up an industry? Like, is this thing going to be a gold mine or are you going to lose all your money?
$1 million question, right?
Today, we're handing you the cheat sheet, the business equivalent of X-ray vision. Porter's 5 forces.
Ah, Porter's 5 forces. It's a classic for a reason.
Mm.
Unpacks the competitive landscape of any industry. Still surprisingly powerful even decades after it was first, put out there.
Okay, so no crystal ball, but I'll take X-ray vision any day. And you're right, this model has serious staying power. Created in 1979 by Michael Porter, a Harvard Business School professor, it's still taught today. What makes it so insightful, would you say?
Well, I think Porter was, kind of brilliant in his simplicity, right?
Uh,
He recognized that competition isn't just about the companies you see, like going head to head. It's
yeah.
about this whole web of forces kind of pushing and pulling on an industry, shaping its overall profitability.
So it's less about who's the biggest and more about, like, what are the rules of the game, right?
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful.
So walk us through it. What are these 5 forces that are secretly controlling the destiny of every business?
All right, so picture this. Imagine these forces as like invisible forces shaping, the destiny of every business in the arena. First up, the most obvious one, rivalry among existing competitors. This is your classic Coke versus Pepsi, Ford versus General Motors, that constant battle for market share.
Okay, that one's pretty self-explanatory. But what makes this rivalry more or less intense in different industries? Like, what should we be looking for?
Great question. One factor is simply the number of players. Think about a farmer's market with like dozens of stalls, all selling basically the same produce. You can bet they're watching each other's prices like hawks.
Right, undercutting each other left and right, trying to offer the best deals.
Exactly. It's more chaotic, right? The more players you have.
Hmm.
Now imagine that same farmer's market, but there's been a drought and everyone's crops are suffering.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Suddenly, that competition gets even more fierce because the pie is smaller. There's less to go around.
Exactly. So slow industry growth can really turn up the heat.
This makes me think about something I read about Amazon. Apparently, the competition at the bottom of their search results, it's like brutal.
Oh, yeah.
It's like those sellers are all fighting for a very limited pool of customer attention.
Absolutely. Because they know if they get buried a couple pages down, it's like they don't even exist.
So we've got the number of players, we've got industry growth. What else factors into this whole like cutthroat rivalry thing?
Another big one is how easy it is for customers to switch between brands. If it's super simple for a customer to ditch one product for another, companies are constantly on edge.
Right, like choosing between 2 brands of bottled water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not much stopping you from switching if one's on sale.
Right. But what if switching is a bigger deal? Like, I'm just picturing myself trying to switch from like Apple to Android. All my apps, my data, that's a headache.
You've hit on a really crucial point. High switching costs, they're like a fortress for businesses.
They don't want to make it easy for you to leave.
Exactly. Even if a competitor is offering something better or cheaper.
So companies are trying to build these switching moats around themselves, like those medieval castles with the moats and the drawbridges. But instead of water, it's your data and your, like, familiarity with their products.
That's a great way to put it. Think about loyalty programs,
Yeah.
proprietary software.
Makes you think twice before you jump ship.
For sure. And then there's what happens when a company wants to just throw in the towel.
Yeah, is it easy to just exit an industry?
Well, that's where exit barriers come into play.
Oh, right. Like if you have a ton of equipment or contracts.
Exactly. Think about, remember when Airline X was struggling? It seemed like the logical thing would be to just shut down, but those airplane leases, they were trapped. High exit barriers like that can make rivalry even more intense because companies are just more desperate.
It's like being stuck on a sinking ship, right? Everyone's fighting over the last lifeboat.
Exactly. It's not pretty.
So we've got the number of competitors, industry growth, those switching costs, exit barriers, anything else fueling this rivalry fire.
One more thing. High fixed costs.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's say you're, I don't know, a paper mill, right? You've invested millions in these massive machines. Those costs don't just disappear if demand for paper drops.
So you're telling me they'd rather slash prices and sell at a loss than just shut down and have those expenses just sitting there?
Sometimes, yeah. And that can trigger these crazy price wars, making the whole industry, less profitable.
Okay, so rivalry is way more complex than I think a lot of us realize. But let's say you're a company, you're at the top of your game, you've weathered the storm of all these rivals. Is there anything else to worry about?
There's always something. Even if you're killing it, New players can always shake things up. That's where the second force comes in, the threat of new entrants.
Oh, that's a good point. It's like that fear of the unknown. So what determines how vulnerable an industry is to these, newcomers?
Well, some industries just naturally have barriers to entry. Like,
Hmm.
imagine trying to launch a new car company today.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. You need a massive factory, these crazy supply chains, a ton of capital just to even start.
Not exactly a weekend project for someone in their garage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
High capital requirements, they're a major deterrent. Like some mountains are just harder to climb than others.
Okay. I like that analogy. High capital costs, lower threat of new entries. What are some other mountains that new companies might have to climb?
Think about industries where economies of scale are crucial, like bulk retailers. Costco can get these incredibly low prices from suppliers because they buy in such huge quantities.
Right. They have the buying power. A new player would really struggle to match that. It's like the bigger you are, the lower your costs, the more competitive you can be.
Exactly. And then there's brand loyalty. Building a brand, it takes time, it takes consistency. Think about Apple. They spent decades cultivating this fiercely loyal customer base.
Yeah, you don't see many like die-hard Apple fans switching to a brand new phone company overnight, right? That brand recognition is powerful.
It's huge. New companies would have to spend a fortune on marketing just to even make a dent in that.
So we've got capital, economies of scale,
Yeah.
brand loyalty, all big barriers to entry. What else makes it tough for these new players to break through?
Well, access to distribution channels can be a huge hurdle. Like imagine you create this amazing new energy drink. Actually getting it on the shelves of supermarkets and convenience stores next to the big players, that's a whole different challenge.
Like trying to get your foot in the door of a really exclusive club, right?
Yeah.
All those relationships, existing contracts.
Exactly, it's tough. And then, of course, there are regulations. Think about pharmaceuticals, clinical trials, regulatory approvals. That stuff can take years and cost billions of dollars.
So it's not just about having a great idea.
Not at all.
You got to navigate this whole web of rules and requirements.
Absolutely. And sometimes, those regulations are there for a reason, but it definitely makes it way harder for new companies to even enter the market.
Wow. So between the regulations, securing distribution, building a brand, overcoming those initial capital hurdles, it seems like new companies really have their work cut out for them.
It's not for the faint of heart, but it's important to remember that all these barriers, as challenging as they are, can actually lead to a healthier, more innovative industry in the long run.
It's like that whole survival of the fittest thing. Only the strong survive, which, theoretically is better for us as consumers, right?
Exactly. But now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about a force that I think often gets overlooked, supplier power.
Okay, so we've tackled the who of the competition, the rivals, the newcomers. Now we're diving into the how, those behind the scenes players who can really make or break a business.
Precisely. Because even if you've mastered your rivals, you've fended off the newcomers, a powerful supplier can still throw you off balance.
It's like that saying, right? It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Even a small supplier can have a huge impact if they're the only game in town.
Oh, absolutely. Picture this.
Yeah.
A car manufacturer, right? Suddenly they can't get this one tiny computer chip. Their whole production line can grind to a halt. Doesn't matter how popular their cars are.
Okay, yeah, that's a nightmare scenario. So how does a company even begin to figure out how much power their suppliers actually have? What are, the warning
Well, you
signs?
got to understand the basics, right? Supply and demand. If you're relying on just a handful of suppliers for something unique, a specific ingredient, a specialized part, those suppliers, they've got you over a barrel.
It's like that whole thing with the rare earth minerals, right? Everyone needs them for all the high-tech gadgets, but only a few companies control the mines.
Exactly. They can basically dictate the price, the delivery schedule, you name it. It's not just physical goods either. Imagine a software company that depends on a single cloud provider, all their data, all their processing power. That provider has a lot of influence.
Yeah, it makes you think twice about putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Digital or otherwise. Okay, so few suppliers equals high power. What else?
How easy is it to switch suppliers? That's another big one. If a company can easily find other sources for what they need, well, supplier power kind of goes out the window.
Right, like a restaurant that just needs basic flour and sugar. Plenty of options out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if switching suppliers means you have to stop production for weeks? You have to retool your machinery, retrain your staff. That's a different story.
Yeah, no one wants to deal with that.
High switching costs, that's leverage for suppliers. And then there's another power play, forward integration.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. That sounds like a strategic chess move. Break it down for me.
Okay, so you're a coffee shop,
Yeah.
and you've got your trusty coffee bean supplier. Now, imagine they decide to open a chain of coffee shops right next door to yours.
Oh, no.
Suddenly, they're not just the supplier, they're a competitor. That's forward integration.
They're cutting you out of the equation.
Exactly. It's a way to grab more profits, potentially even squeeze out the companies that you to supply to.
Okay, so companies need to be on the lookout for that. So we're talking about navigating this whole supplier power dynamic. We're assessing our vulnerabilities. What can companies actually do if they find themselves, kind of at the mercy of a powerful supplier?
Well, one option is diversification. Can you find other sources for your key materials or parts?
Right, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Another approach. What about building stronger relationships with your suppliers? Think long-term contracts, volume discounts.
So it's less transactional, more of a strategic partnership.
Right. When suppliers feel like they're part of your success story, they're more likely to work with you. It's win-win. But let's face it, sometimes those relationships, they just aren't going to happen. Or you've got a supplier who's just determined to, throw their weight around.
So what then? What's your last resort?
Vertical integration.
Ah, there it is, that chess move again.
Remember our coffee example. Vertical integration would be that coffee shop buying their own coffee farm or
Yeah.
maybe their own roasting facility.
You become your own supplier. That's bold.
It's a big decision, for sure. You're basically getting into a whole new business.
Yeah.
But it can be a way to get out from under that supplier power.
Weighing the risks and rewards. Okay, we've spent a lot of time talking about the power of suppliers, but now let's flip the script. Let's talk about the folks holding all the cards. The customers.
Ah, yes. Buyer power. Because ultimately, the customer decides whether a product lives or dies.
It's the vote with your wallet philosophy in action, but I imagine some customers have a louder voice than others. Right?
100%.
Yeah.
And just like with suppliers, the power dynamics between businesses and their customers, it all depends on a few key things.
Okay, hit me with it. What are we looking at here?
Well, first, how many buyers are there? If you're selling to millions of individual people, each individual customer, they don't have as much leverage. It's like their purchase is a drop in the ocean.
Right, it gets diluted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now, let's say you sell airplane engines. Your customer base is like, what, a dozen airlines maybe?
Oh, I see what you mean. Suddenly, those customers have a lot more bargaining power because they're placing these massive orders. It's like going into a car dealership and saying, I'll take 10 of those. You're going to get a better deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of deals, the size and volume of those purchases, that matters a lot. Remember the whole Walmart effect.
Of course. Everyone knows Walmart has low prices. But those low prices, that comes from their massive buying power, right? They can basically dictate terms to suppliers because they're buying so much.
Right. Big buyers like Walmart, they can really push prices down across an entire industry.
So it's not just how many customers you have, it's how much those customers are actually buying. What else influences customer power?
That whole switching thing we talked about, it applies here too. If it's easy for a customer to ditch you and go somewhere else, you got to work harder to keep them happy.
Right, like gas stations. If one gas station is more expensive, I'm going across the street. Easy.
Exactly. But imagine trying to switch your whole company's software system. That's a nightmare. No one wants to do that unless they absolutely have to.
It's those switching moats again, but this time it's the customer who's trapped.
Right. Companies try to create those high switching costs to hold on to customers.
Loyalty programs, long contracts, all that jazz. But even then, companies can't get complacent, can they?
Oh, no way. Not in the age of online reviews and social media. Your reputation is everything. One bad review can go viral in seconds.
It's not just about negotiating prices, it's about managing your public image.
Big time. Companies have to create a positive customer experience or it can backfire big time.
Okay, so we've got the number of buyers, the size of their wallets, and how easy it is to walk away, all factoring into customer power. Anything else we should be aware of?
One more thing. How sensitive are customers to changes in price? Some industries are just naturally more sensitive than others. Like, if you're selling something that people don't absolutely need, travel, entertainment. When money's tight, that's the first thing to go.
Right. I'm not booking a luxury vacation if I'm worried about making rent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those industries have to be really careful with their pricing, find ways to offer value, even if they can't always compete on price alone.
It's a balancing act for sure. Keep the customers happy, but also keep the lights on. Okay, so we've covered the head-to-head competition rivals, new companies trying to break in, and we've talked about the power dynamics between companies, their suppliers, their customers. What's left? What's the final force shaping all of this?
This final one, it's kind of sneaky because it often comes from outside the industry's usual suspects. We're talking about the threat of substitutes.
Okay, now you've got my attention. That sounds a little ominous. What are we talking about here? This isn't just like the generic brand versus the name brand, is it? Okay, now you've got my
Mhm.
attention. That sounds a little ominous. What are we talking about here? This isn't just like the generic brand versus the name brand, is it?
We're talking about something way more interesting than that. Think of it this way. A substitute is like that friend of a friend who shows up at a party and suddenly everyone's gravitating towards them. They might not be your direct competition, right?
Hmm.
Not in the traditional sense, but they're offering this alternative and it's ticking all the boxes for what people need.
Okay, you're going to have to give me an example. I'm having trouble picturing this.
All right, so imagine you're a taxi company, right? Back in, say, 2005. You've got your cabs, your drivers, your system.
Yeah, business is booming. You're feeling good.
Exactly. Life is good. Then along comes this little thing called Uber.
Oh, here we go. I knew it, the case study everyone uses.
Well, it's a classic for a reason. Because Uber, they weren't a taxi company, right?
Okay.
Not really. No fleet of vehicles. But they used technology to connect drivers and passengers in a way that was just like way more convenient. Often cheaper, too.
They changed the entire game, disrupted the whole industry.
Exactly. And the taxi companies, they were so focused on each other, they didn't see it coming.
Didn't see that curveball. Okay, that's actually a little scary for any business, right? So how do you even begin to spot those potential substitutes before they, turn your world upside down?
One big thing is the price-performance comparison. Like, let's say you're a fancy restaurant, you're known for your multi-course meals, and then bam, a gourmet burger truck opens up down the street. Half the price.
And suddenly, those tiny appetizers don't look so good anymore.
Exactly. If a substitute can deliver the same thing, or even better at a lower price, that's a problem.
So businesses need to know what their customers care about, right? Because sometimes it's not just about the price. The shift from landline phones to cell phones, that wasn't about cost. It was about features, convenience.
You got it. A substitute can come in with something totally new, something the existing industry hasn't even thought of. And that's how you get blindsided.
It's like you're so busy defending your little castle, you don't realize someone's building a bridge right around you.
Exactly. Another factor. How easy is it for customers to actually make the switch? If it's easy, look out.
Right, like going from sugar to artificial sweetener, no big deal. But switching your company's entire, I don't know, manufacturing process to a new type of material, that's a different story.
Huge difference. So yeah, those sticky switching costs, they can buy you some time to adapt. But it's not a guarantee, because if the substitute is appealing enough, customers will find a way to overcome those hurdles.
People will do what they need to do, right? Okay, so we've talked about price, we've talked about switching costs, anything else when it comes to these sneaky substitutes.
Last but not least, perception is everything. Even if a substitute isn't objectively better, if people think it is, it's a threat.
It's like that whole fake it till you make it thing, but for products.
Kind of.
Mm.
Companies have to understand how they're being perceived, especially compared to those substitutes.
It's about staying one step ahead. And on that note, this whole conversation has been amazing. Really insightful stuff. We've covered so much ground. Rivalry, new companies trying to enter the market, the power dynamics between companies, suppliers, their customers, and of course, those sneaky substitutes. It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is. And that's what Porter's five forces shows us, right? Understanding these forces, that's how businesses make smarter decisions.
Exactly. And whether you're, thinking about starting your own business someday or you just want to understand how the world works a little better, this stuff is important.
100%. Knowledge is power.
So, to everyone listening, we have a little challenge for you. Think about an industry you're interested in. Maybe it's the industry you work in. Grab a napkin, draw out those five forces. Who are the players? Where's the power? What about those substitutes? Are there any out there that could shake things up?
Start looking at the world through this lens, and I promise you'll be surprised by what you see.
This is The Deep Dive, signing off. Keep those minds curious, and we'll catch you next time.